So welcome to all of you, our volunteers, our donors, our members, and our many, many partners. And a special shout out to our colleagues at the U.S. Forest Service, Bureau of Land Management, National Park Service, and California State Parks. It's great to have so many partners and supporters with us today.
The pandemic has disrupted our lives in many ways, but for these volunteers, it has meant that for the most part, work restoring the trails had to be curtailed over most of its 2,650-mile length. So we offer our gratitude for their continued participation in our trail maintenance programs and hope soon these programs become open to them again.
So now for some financial results from 2019. So we did publish an annual report for 2019. Looks like this. And you can find this report on our website at pcta.org in the About Us section. The amount of work that we're able to accomplish is only possible with your support. So some of the numbers I'd like to highlight from 2019 is that we generated 3.4 million in private contributions, and the majority of this revenue is from individuals, like many of you who are with us today. Whether it's a $35 membership, dues donation, or a larger gift, it all makes a difference. Also included in our financial results is close to 1 million received through agreements with the U.S. Forest Service and the Bureau of Land Management. So our total revenue was 4.4 million. To look at the complete picture, however, we need to add the value of our volunteer hours. We had over 100,000 hours, and this is valued at 2.7 million. Total revenue is 7.1 million. 7.1 million that we were able to put to work for the Pacific Crest National Scenic Trail. At the same time, we kept expenses well within budget, and we finished the year with a healthy surplus of 250,000. And then there's 2020. In February of 2020, we had our annual trip to Washington, D.C. for Hike the Hill. Staff was joined by volunteers and high school students from Environmental Charter School. And we called on members of Congress and met with our agency partners in their Washington, D.C. office. From there, a small group of PCTA staff traveled to Harper's Ferry and spent some time meeting with staff from the Appalachian Trail Conservancy. It was time well spent, and we shared differences and we shared similarities and talked about the work that we do to protect and preserve these national scenic trails. And then in March, the pandemic hit. Since that time, PCTA has spent a great deal of time working with our federal agency partners to figure out what to do. What to do about the hikers and equestrians about to embark on trail journeys. What to do about our volunteer program and how to keep up our work on land acquisition and trail protection. It's been the hardest year of my PCTA career. We absolutely want volunteers to be able to get out and continue their trail maintenance work. We absolutely want the hikers and horseback riders to be able to get out on the trail. I mean, that's why we do what we do. And our work is so important to keep the PCT open and available. We had to make many tough decisions to try and do the right thing. And you're going to hear a little bit more about that later on in the presentation today. And then at the end of May, with the George Floyd killing and the social unrest that followed, we heard from our community about the importance of the PCT being welcoming to all, and that PCTA should be doing something about this. That was followed by wildfires, and another historic first, as the federal agencies had to make the decision to close almost 1,800 miles of the PCT on federal land. So that's what 2020 has brought so far. And under these conditions, the PCTA continues to do some amazing work. And you're going to hear more about 2020 in today's presentation. Thanks to everybody for your incredible support. It's more important now than ever. We need to be able to weather this storm and be in a strong position to continue to take care of the PCT and continue to be a strong partner in the management and protection of the Pacific Crest National Scenic Trail.
2019 was a very exciting year for land protection on the PCT. In partnership with the Michigan-California Timber Company, the Trust for Public Land, the Weiss Foundation, the Forest Service, and the surrounding local communities, we protected 10,300 acres in Siskiyou and Trinity Counties, California. The Train Divide project protected 17 miles of the PCT, opened up new public access for hikers, horseback riders, campers, hunters, and anglers to 10 alpine lakes and many streams, and created opportunities for new loop hikes using the PCT and other area trails. We're moving forward in partnership with Tejon Ranch and the Forest Service to relocate 37 miles of the PCT onto Tejon Ranch. Tejon Ranch is a 270,000 acre property that sits in a unique hotspot of biological diversity. So far in this project, we have identified the potential trail route through the ranch along with 3 off-trail campsites and water access points. We are in the process of negotiating the trail easement, the conveyance agreement, and the accompanying management plans. Thank you to our donors, volunteers, and members who make this work happen.
We know that 2020 has been a challenge. This year, the PCT was dealt 2 massive blows, first with the COVID-19 pandemic, and then with the unprecedented wildfire season. 2019 was a great year for volunteers getting out on the trail. We had more and more folks participate in projects and our training events. We had 938 volunteers at Trail Skills College events in 2019, and that includes 157 folks who went through SAW certifications and recertifications. In 2019, PCTA chapters and our local volunteer groups made a huge contribution to maintenance efforts on the PCT. Thank you to all of you who contributed and took part in making that happen. We also depend on our partnerships to accomplish a lot of our work. In 2019, partner organizations contributed more than 30,000 hours of volunteer service. A couple of the notable ones are our partners at ACE, American Conservation Experience, where core crew members put in 14,000 hours of service. Our partners from the Tahoe Rim Trail Association, where their volunteers contributed more than 7,000 hours. And Washington Trails Association, where volunteers in Washington helped do 55,000 hours of service on the PCT. So we know that 2020 has been an epic year for the PCT, but as always, safety is our #1 priority, and that's been no different with COVID. The pandemic hit and forced us to cancel most of our maintenance efforts, just as we were starting to get volunteers out to our Trail Skills College training events and scouting to plan projects for 2020. As many of you know, we had to cancel all of our 2020 Trail Skills College training events, as well as most of our backcountry projects and pack-in projects, like the Skyline Sasquatch Crew. But by early summer, we were able to implement a detailed re-engagement plan and enhanced safety protocols that take into account all the local, state, and federal guidelines. We're planning for the 2021 field season under the COVID cloud with updated protocols for working with COVID conditions. We continue to monitor and use the best science available to make those updates, and we will continue to monitor throughout the winter. You can also learn more about volunteering with PCTA through our website at pcta.org/volunteer. We have a wealth of information there. You can also email volunteer@pcta.org with your specific questions. Finally today, I just wanted to address the fire impacts along the PCT. We received a number of questions from you in the community about the impacts. Wildfires led to the historic closure of millions of acres of public land in the West this year, most of the trail in California and Oregon. We also had hazardous smoke that covered much of the West for weeks on end. In addition to COVID, when the volunteers were just getting back out on the trail in many places to do maintenance, they were forced to shut down by these fires, closures, and smoky conditions. At one point, 1,800 miles of the PCT were closed to public access, and this includes volunteers and our core crews. We're deeply saddened by the loss of life and the devastation to the communities, both directly and indirectly along the trail. We have learned that at least 90 miles of the PCT are within burn areas, but it's still too soon for us to know the extent of the real damage on the ground. There are fires still burning along the trail, and many sections of the trail are still closed. Just know that we'll get out as soon as we can to assess the damage, and once we know more about the damage and the impacts, we'll share those findings with our community. At this point, we can sum it up and say that we know we've missed almost a whole trail maintenance season, and we've had a catastrophic fire season, but we also have to wait and see what the winter brings to the trail. We know that winters can have a dramatic effect on trail conditions and our trail maintenance plans. So stay tuned for more information. I just want to close today by saying something that I can't say enough this year, and many of you who have been on our crew leader Q&As have heard me say how much we appreciate the PCT community's ongoing support, flexibility, and patience as we work through this epic year.
2019 was a fantastic year. We'd issued more permits than ever, long-distance PCT permits for trips over 500 miles. 7,888 permits that year. Nearly 1,000 people finished, or at least that's what we have records of. It was just a vibrant gangbusters year. Then, as we got into 2020, everyone heard about COVID, right? And if you remember back, none of us knew much. Initially, we asked all hikers to get off the trail, right? Think back, that early period, it was pretty strict stay at home across the nation. So it involved asking PCT hikers who were out there already to leave the trail, and asking people who were starting, they should have been starting 50 people per day, to not head to the trail. So a lot of collaboration. We heard from so many of you about the need to stay safe. So as we look forward to 2021, there's a lot of uncertainty. We're doing a lot of collaboration at this point. We're all looking to get back to how it used to be. So we decided this year to not open for applications in October. It's very important that we gather as much information about whether it is safe to travel extensively, like long distance hike or ride. And instead, we'll have an update for you in mid-January. We don't know at this point. We are gathering information, trying to figure out the best way forward. But I do know that in 2021, the trail will still be here for us. And I think that we're in the era of day hiking, the era of local backpacking. So get out. If you live near the PCT, enjoy it. Please wear a mask when you're passing people, and stay tuned for updates about what long distance hiking might look like next year. In conclusion, thank you so much for your support. These are very challenging times, and the PCT needs your help.
I have the great pleasure of bringing you some good news out of our nation's capital today. For more than a decade, the PCTA has been pressing our congressional delegation to live up to the ideal for land protection that Congress envisioned back in the mid-1960s. That's when Congress created the Land and Water Conservation Fund, which was meant to ensure a consistent stream of money for projects like the PCT. This money comes from the lease payments made by offshore oil and gas exploration, and it's used by local, state, and federal governments to protect properties all across the country. The good news is that in early 2019, after the law that created the Land and Water Conservation Fund had expired, a bipartisan Congress permanently reauthorized the program. We were very happy with this outcome, although it did fall short of our goals. Under that new law, Congress still had to decide how much money to spend every year. Last July, Congress passed the Great American Outdoors Act, which the President signed in August. This fully funded the Land and Water Conservation Fund at $900 million every year. The law also provides $9 billion, that's billion with a B, to tackle the maintenance backlog on trails and facilities in national parks and forests over the next 5 years. Talking to our elected representatives about the Pacific Crest Trail and what's at stake for our public lands is an important part of what our association does. We could not do this work without your support or your involvement. I thank each of you who wrote or called your Congress members during this long push to sustain the Land and Water Conservation Fund. Your voice truly matters.
Thank you so much, Mark. It is so good to be with everyone this afternoon. I really appreciate you joining together to talk about the accomplishments in 2020, and for me to share a little bit about the Forest Service gratitude for the work that's gone on despite all of the challenges this past year. A heartfelt thanks to PCTA staff, volunteers, members, and board members for the fabulous partnership and support that you've given us in what has really been a most difficult year. I want to share with you several accomplishments that I'm particularly proud of. The Inyo National Forest Plan was released with the first designated management area for any of the 25 national forests that the PCT goes through. What's important about this is it gives us the opportunity to clearly spell out the desired conditions and protection for the PCT. And I know that it will be an important start to plans along the trail. And then finally, we have to talk at least a little bit about COVID-19. I have to tell you that PCTA staff and our partners with the American Conservation Experience have been superlative in being flexible, showing leadership, and really reaching out to try to figure out where we can get work done. It was not easy. And for our PCTA staff, they had to deal with, and our volunteers, they had to deal with every unit on the entire trail having different COVID restrictions. And so it became very difficult to figure out where to have volunteers work. And in some cases, we never were able to because of the increasing pandemic. But please know that we did get some good work done. And whether it be at Echo Summit or in the Sierra Buttes or up north in the Pasayten Wilderness, good work was done this summer and last fall. And I really appreciate the skills and abilities that y'all bring to taking care of the trail. You have my heartfelt gratitude for your efforts in 20, your persistence, and your patience. There's much unknown about what will happen in 21, but I do know that this is a team that will be responsive and will look for opportunities and will take good care of the trail into the future. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your support. It's greatly appreciated.
I know that 2019 might feel like a lifetime ago, but I do want to give a quick report on our fundraising results. In 2019, we had 14,300 members and raised $3.4 million in private contributions. Our members represent all 50 states, 3 U.S. territories, the District of Columbia, and an all-time high of 50 countries. This shows how widespread the love of the trail is, wherever you are watching this now. Thank you so much for your support. I just want to recognize this is not a normal year. We've all been affected by the pandemic, social unrest, and election year anxiety. It's so easy to watch the news or follow social media to see the many ways our country is divided. But one thing still seems to hold true: the trail still unites us. We come together with the love of the outdoors, knowing that together we can protect and preserve the trail for all of us and for the generations that follow. We help one another, work side by side on trail crews, write letters of support for the PCT, and share the inspiration we discover on the trail through our stories, our art, our photos, and videos. We've always loved when you share with us why you give to the PCTA. And this year, we've heard from more of you than ever. In a time of uncertainty, many of you have found solace in the fact that the trail is there even when you can't be. Memories of past journeys and dreams of future ones have encouraged you in dark times. You've told us how you've come to realize that the trail is more meaningful than ever to you and that you really want to help. And we can't thank you enough for all that you do.
Okay, and that concludes our presentation for today. Hopefully we've answered your questions. We did our best to answer your questions throughout our presentations. However, if you have questions that were not answered, please feel free to send us an email through our website, or you can email me directly. My email address is lbergeron@pcta.org. I hope you enjoyed the presentation and learned more about our important work of protecting, preserving, and promoting the Pacific Crest National Scenic Trail. Thank you to all of our presenters, and thank you for joining us today and for your support of our work.